Hello everybody, this is Chippy Gissy of YouTube, and yes, there is a simple visual this time around. I'm just gonna edit this video in Clipchamp and you'll see why. Or I guess you'll hear why, but bottom line, you'll know what I mean. But there are two purposes for this video.
They are kind of semi-related to one another, but
They're different nonetheless. We'll start with the one I want to get out of the way, like the whole addendums to like two previous videos. One I made years back, like 2019, and the other I made in 2021. And when it comes to adding the addendums, I do want to start with the latter first because there's a lot to go on with that one. And the latter video that I'm talking about is the process of making a visual novel style web series. Now, I do want to say that most of that video aged fine. Like, I still do VN frames, so really, there's not much change there. However, if there's one thing I don't exactly do anymore is saving each expression as a PNG when it comes to the VN sprites. At least when it comes to this type of format. And what the hell do I mean by this? Because I know that when it comes to regular visual novels, you kind of have to save the expressions as PNGs. Well, I think after an hour I made that video, a friend of mine pulled me aside and showed me a bit of an easier way to make the VN frames because the way I was doing it, they're just like, no, I gotta make this girl's life easier. Okay, maybe it's not their exact wording, but that's basically the overall message that I got. But yeah, there is a simpler way of making VN frames than what I was doing before.
although there are two methods to this simple solution,
The Fire Alpaca method and the Clip Studio method. We'll start with the Fire Alpaca method first since I kinda did that for the final episode of Penalty X. If you want to do this, consider this like a pseudo tutorial. Firstly, what you need to do is take the .mdp file for the needed sprite that has everything, expressions, eyes, mouths, eyebrows, and all that. It has everything there. Then you drag it over to the main layer area for the project file that you make your VN frames in. Release the mouse click, and then boom! You'll have a customizable sprite to change expressions with. Now, for the Clip Studio method. This one I did for all of Moon Mansion Solitary, which we will get to soon. This one is even easier to do because, firstly, all you need to do is click on the folder of the project file that has everything, including the main sprite, and just press Ctrl C on the keyboard. Go to the main project file that you make for your VN frames, Ctrl V, and then boom! The folder layer is now copy-pasted into the project file, with the ability to change expressions and all. So yeah, there's really no need to save expressions as PNGs anymore. At least when it comes to the visual novel style series format. When it comes to regular visual novels, yeah, you kind of need to save the PNGs, but for this particular format, there is no need to. At least the way I go about with it. I know that when it comes to the more fancier video editing, that's a totally different story, but I'm sure that there's some explanations in the comments. But anyways, enough about the process of making a visual novel style series of the addendum for that. Let's go for addendum for another thing, actually. And that is the addendum for the lessons I've learned when making a weekly series. If you don't feel like watching that video, I understand, but so I'll just recap of what I said in that video, in a much shorter span. So, in the chronological order. Sour candy filled donuts. Do not participate in an incredibly active roleplay while working on a series. And vice versa! Just to be clear. Maroku's Adventures. Make sure you are motivated enough to work on a weekly series because, it'll be sad if you don't. Luckily, with Maroku's Adventures, it is resolved years later, but, still. Nemomiya the Chaotic Hero. You can't work on a weekly series without some sort of challenge going about. This one is a bit more self-explanatory. And with 7 guidances to wishful safety, do not have a story with fight scenes for a weekly challenge. Worst mistake of my fucking life!
Anyways, you got that cleared up? Good, good.
Now onto the lessons I learned with Moon Mansion Solitary. There is a couple, so I'll try my best to keep it a little bit brief, but still have more explanation at the same time, so be prepared for something a little bit longer. So, the first lesson that I learned when working on Moon Mansion Solitary is that it is okay to add more things if it feels like something is a little bit too easy. Like, really, the only reason something like episode 3 got delayed and had to reschedule was more or less due to the fact that some personal shit was happening during that week and the week prior. Otherwise, the first 2 episodes, despite some challenging moments, felt like a little bit of a breeze. Now, on the flip side, it is okay to reduce, reuse, and recycle some frames you like from previous episodes. Honestly, this one tweet I remember seeing saved my fucking life. It says, and I quote, I'm gonna say something controversial, but if you have an indie animation, make PNG assets and recycle. Especially if you have trouble keeping up with content creation. Making a show is hard enough. This is something I want to keep in mind for the future, really. I remember I kind of mentioned this to a couple of my friends. One of them, who really liked to go all out back when they animated, said that I'm doing the smart thing. And the other friend said that they were surprised I have not done this previously. And with that, I just want to say that back then, I was a dumbass that didn't know any better. But yeah, those are the lessons that I learned when working on Moon Mansion Solitary.
Speaking of,
It is now time for me to talk about how I feel about working on Moon Mansion Solitary as a whole. Yeah! Now, I do want to talk about how it all started when it comes to Moon Mansion Solitary because this is quite the interesting case of like having to deal with so many ideas before I settle on this. I did have a couple of ideas before. One of them is a named project called New World Memories. However, months later, I was not feeling New World Memories, so I kind of switched over to wanting to make the remake for Caraflops for the weekly challenge. But then I was stressing myself out over the Caraflops remake, so I decided to save that for another time. So, at that point, I was struggling to make like a simple story. And then my mind wandered off. There were a couple of factors, really. One that started it all was just like, mushroom maid. And then it spiraled to, dimensional mushroom folk maid. And then I thought about the flyer folk. And then I thought about the concept of a queer platonic relationship. And then Moon Mansion Solitary existed. I do feel that Moon Mansion Solitary is a much more simple story to work under a weekly basis. I also took advantage of the fact that the minimum requirement for the weekly challenge was 4 episodes, so hee hee hoo ha ha. As for the story itself, I decided to have it set in a slice of life fantasy type of deal. It's hard to explain because my universe is a little bit fucked. I've kind of wanted to make a story about a mushroom folk, a humanoid species that I've kind of developed, and a flyer folk, another humanoid species that I remember playing around with, but kind of put on the back burner until just this year. And as I mentioned earlier, I was kind of having a desire to write about a queer platonic relationship rather than a romantic relationship. Like, maybe I'm just a little bit jaded about how I wrote about Jades and Roses, but I feel like the last time I kind of wrote about a romantic relationship, the story kind of felt a little bit rushed. Not to mention, something else happened during that point, and I felt awkward of making it a fanime, so I decided to make this like an audio drama instead. So yeah, death. But yeah, I just wanted to make a queer platonic relationship rather than a romantic relationship. So yeah. I will say this, a lot of the characters, including the characters I cannot spoil, have newer designs. Like Sanforian's design is not exactly an old design. Vivimi, on the other hand, is does have a bit of an older design. Like her design is not exactly new-ish, basically. Cause I initially just designed Vivimi like as like an example of making like a PNG tuber commission sheet, which I still kind of want to do, but that's something I had to think about. And really, that's all I can say on that one because, well, Vivimi's design is not exactly old. It's not exactly new-ish either. Like it's old-ish. It's not new, but it's not old, if you catch my drift. But anyways, let's talk about the production of Moon Mansion Solitary. Audio editing was fine. Like there were some hurdles, but really, I think that's par for the course when it comes to like working on productions.
There was a bit of waiting that I had to deal with, but luckily,
Unlike most of the previous times that I had to wait, this was a breeze. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, you could watch my Penalty Belt retrospective. The VN frames were super easy given the fact I was doing this on Clip Studio Paint. And surprisingly, same goes for the CG frames too. I think it's also due to the fact that I was using a lot of vector layers, which, gosh dang, they were my fucking savior. But also I was using like a pen tool that I had anti-aliasing turned off. That, and there was no pressure sensitivity, so I don't have to worry about that either. But yeah, that's probably the reason why the CG frames were also a breeze too. With that said, there are times where I was feeling a little bit demotivated. Again, the week for episode 3 and prior to that weren't exactly fun. Thankfully, I was still able to finish this series sooner than both Maruku's Adventures, which was on hiatus until 2021, and Seven Guidances, which its finale came around months later. And speaking of finale, I guess this is semi-spoilers, so if you have not seen Moon Mansion Solitary, go watch it now, because I'm going to mention something happening in the finale. I'll give you some time before I continue, so, go ahead, go watch the finale. Oh, you're back! Or if you just don't care about spoilers. But anyways, yeah, let's talk about the finale. Or at the very least, one part of it. And that's when Vivimi and Senforion had to sing. Now, with the song that I've tried to create, Break the Barriers, yes, it is a relatively short song. Yes, it's condensed. Will I make a full version? One of these days, but I have to think of clever lyrics, if you catch my drift. And trust me, that requires a lot of brain power coming from me.
i.e., I need to work on my vocabulary.
But yeah, onto the singing itself. We'll start with Senforion's part. The VA for him, Audio Avery, did a fantastic job singing as Senforion. In fact, he did a fantastic job as a whole. Now, as for me singing, since I had voice Vivimi, I won't lie, I do feel a little bit nervous because when I did all of my lines, including the singing, I had to speed run them getting them done. Keep in mind, I am still living with my family, and by the time of this video, an asshole that my mom calls her boyfriend. So, what other choice do I have? And plus, I was also recording in the closet, which was very uncomfortable because it was so cramped. I need to clean out my closet more often. Anyways, as for mixing the vocals, it was a little bit challenging at first because, this was kind of my first time working with someone else's singing voice, as well as mixing with my own singing voice too. Like mixing those two together it was a little bit challenging, but surprisingly, it worked out in the end. And truth be told, I have worked on the mixing of the singing part before I finished audio editing because I was actually really excited to get the put the two singing parts together Like, I was actually kind of excited about that. Like, yeah, I was nervous about my part for singing because I do feel like that I'm only slightly above average, but overall, I was excited to get the um song together. But anyways, enough about the singing. Let's talk about the video editing. Oh joy! So let's start with the end result. The end result is super satisfying. Like, I'm actually happy about how I was able to learn the techniques in hit film. The process, though, grueling as hell. Like, my computer fucking lags every time I try to get something down. Not to mention, there are also times when hit films stop responding, and I just had to pray that it doesn't crash, because Lord knows if I were to lose progress, I ain't gonna be happy. Doesn't help that with the latter half of the series, when it comes to exporting the episodes, um, I keep getting bloody errors. It's just like, oh yeah, so there's an error about this. You might want to try again. I'm just like, bruh, please. Luckily, I was still able to export them since, the episodes are already out. But man, did it suck. There are two things that I kind of feel that I need to do. One, I probably need to update HitFilm because really, I think I might have the same version since like 2019. I feel like it's basically long overdue for an update. But also, I'm kind of in desperate need of a new computer. Like, there is a reason why I'm using Clipchamp to edit this video rather than like using HitFilm because I don't feel like turning on my gaming computer that has HitFilm in it, and also I don't feel like dealing with HitFilm crashing on me. With that said, if I want to continue editing in HitFilm, I probably need to do the former, which is updating HitFilm, because at the moment money is tight. So unless I want to set up a donation goal for both a new computer and as well as a Nintendo Switch, shit like this probably needs to wait until everything is settled. Anyways, that's enough of what I feel like with the production in so many details. So let's talk about my overall thoughts with working on Moon Mansion Solitary. Honestly, working on a series like this kind of brings a smile to my face, despite some of the hardships that I have to deal with. And as for working on the parts that are just outside of the VN frame realm, kind of makes me want to do a series outside of the visual novel style format. Though, it's if it's a series, it should be like a series that's not in a weekly format because there is a reason why I stuck with the visual novel style format for Moon Mansion Solitary as long as I did. If I were to make a series that's outside of the visual novel style format and want to, give myself some sort of adrenaline, it's probably going to be on the basis of a bi-weekly format, i.e., one episode per 2 weeks, or a tri-weekly format, i.e., one episode per 3 weeks. As long as it's not the weekly format, I feel like doing a series outside of the visual novel style format will be doable for me. At least in my personal opinion. I know that people would have their disagreements. And as for some future things in regards to Moon Mansion Solitary, there's probably some ideas that I have in mind that I kind of want to do in regards to it. Maybe some cute ideas for OVAs and all that, maybe. But in the meantime, I think I probably need a rest from making a series like Moon Mansion Solitary. And with that, I think I'm good to go. Yeah! I hope that this is not too monotonous to listen to. Or at the very least, if you were working on a drawing, I hope you got some progress done. I know a lot of folks, myself included, always tend to listen to long form videos while they draw. But all in all, I think that might be it for this video. I hope you find it at the very least a little bit enlightening and, able to see from my perspective as garbled up as I sound in this video. But with that, I hope you have a good one and take care. This is Chibi YouTube signing out. Goodbye!